Hi, this is Oliver with Trivium Financial Training, and today I'm going to show you how to create a flexible CapEx schedule, also sometimes called an S-curve or a construction curve. And so there are two ways to do this. Well, one way is very often done, and this is the traditional method. And so what the traditional method looks like, and I'm going to show you how to construct the timeline that it's used with in just a moment, but it looks like this. So it's a set of inputs that adds up to 100%. And this 100% is kind of key right here, because if it adds up to more than 100%, it means that when we actually compute the curve down here, our costs are going to be over or under 100%, and that's not good because your accounting is off. So one of the issues with the traditional S-curve is that if I wanted to do a scenario analysis where I had a higher amount of construction time, so projects sometimes are not delivered on time. Say I wanted to change this to 12, my traditional curve would fall off immediately, and it does this because it adds up to something a lot more. So originally when we had 8 months, it would have summed these inputs. When we switch to 9 months or 12 months or whatever, it's going to keep adding the rest of these. And so what this means is that you can readjust these figures to bring it back down to 106%, but you have to readjust it every time you want to change the number of months that you have in the construction period. So I'm going to go up here and change this back to 8. And what you'll notice is that no matter what the timing is, the Weibull distribution will always come true. And the key to understanding this is that we're not inputting a curve. We are mathematically creating one with a shape input and a skew input. And I'm going to get to this in just a moment, but the first thing I'd like to touch on is how to sort of create this construction period setup. So we have 8 as the number of inputs. Let me change this back again really quick. What I have here is the month, so we're going to start with 0, just do equals 0 plus 1. This allows us to easily just sort of paste this across. This really will not change, even though the 0 is an input. If I wanted to offset it a little bit, I could do that, but we really don't want to do that. So what this does, it's a true-false switch, and this tells us whether we are in a period of construction or not. And that's actually how the calculations will be driven. Every time you see a true or you multiply a number by true, it's the same as multiplying something by 1. You can think of this as a binary 1 or 0. But anytime you see false with the switch, you're multiplying a number by 0, and anything multiplied by 0 equals 0. And this comes out as something very useful. So when we're constructing a flexible curve, we're going to have an S-curve that equals our inputs, right here, multiplied by the construction period switch. So 27 multiplied by true is 27%. But if we come over here, 3% multiplied by false is like multiplying 3% by 0. It's still going to come out to 0. This means that our curve is going to be accurate for the number of inputs that we create with it. The dates, they're there if you'd like to use them. We're just using an edate function. But back to the construction period, all this formula really is saying, okay, equals our number of months of construction as a hard-coded thing, as an absolute reference, is greater than or equal to 1. That's true. And so as we paste this across, it goes across each of these months and checks that. So our last date is going to be their absolute reference number of months, 8, is greater than or equal to 8. That's true. But 9 is greater than 8, and so 8 is not greater than or equal to 9. That's false. And that's the underlying logic of creating a construction period switch. So let's get into the Weibull distribution a little bit. The inputs, again, are driven by two factors, the beta and the alpha. And there are two different versions of the Weibull formula, two different functions. So if I have equals Weibull distribution x2 alpha to beta to whatever, that doesn't matter right now. Just to get to the last part, this is a check to see whether you're looking for the cumulative distribution function, the CDF, or the probability density function. And we're always going to choose false for this formula because it's giving us two different formulas essentially. False is the one we're going to be using for everything. So the key to understanding the Weibull is that it's a tool to create a mathematically informed construction curve up here. So in this chart, you'll notice there are two colors. The blue represents the traditional S-curve, and the orange represents the Weibull S-curve. And so, again, you have inputted, or we have inputted a curve here. You don't really get to do that with the Weibull distribution. Rather, you shape it. So we have the shape input and the skew input, and we're going to see what changing these things up looks like. Now, before we change anything, just note, we've sort of gone a step ahead, and rather than just having an inputted beta, we've calculated beta to be the midpoint, which is the number of months divided by 2, so that you get 4. This gives us sort of a base for skewing things to the left or right, and then divided further by gamma. And gamma is a shape driver, so the shape driver drives the shape input. Makes sense. And I'm going to show you how that changes things right now. So what I've done here, this table right here, this is a scenario input. So all the calculations in the model are going to be right here. And so everything you see in blue, you can change, and it will respond appropriately. Right now, these numbers reflect scenario 1. If I change this to scenario 2, we're going to see what happens to the curve up here based off of a sensitivity. Gamma is less than 1, so we changed gamma to 0.5. So again, 1, you see a little bit of a steeper curve. Gamma is less than 1, you see a little bit more of a flat curve. And that's good for us to know. Now, gamma is greater than 1. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so it kind of makes sense. As you go higher along on the shape input, it's going to be shaped a little bit more intensely, you might say. So back to base, we're going to see what happens when alpha is less than 1. Well, it means that the first period is skewed to the left a little bit less, but it's showing that it's staying sort of away from the midpoint. And so what happens if alpha is greater than 1, for example? You're going to see very much a standard probability distribution curve. Starts at 0, goes up, goes back down to 0. And I don't know that any of these actually goes to 0 necessarily. Typically it's like a very small fraction of a percent away from 0. But yeah, so let's see what happens with a low deviation. Relatively flat again. Oh, that's actually exactly the same as the gamma is less than 1. Sorry about that. And then lastly, the inputted beta. So this scenario just allows you to, rather than calculate beta, play around with any number you want to have in there in order to set up your curve. So 20, it's going to be very flat. And then you can also, of course, change the alpha for any of these. There you go, that gets interesting. But let's go back to our base and show how this is set up down below. So what you'll notice right here is that the Weibull distribution does not add up to 100%. And that's okay, because the S-curve does. We're actually going to use this sum. So this is just the sum of all of this. This is the Weibull function multiplied by the true-false switch up here. In order to stop it from going any further than it needs to, multiply by 0. And then the S-curve is going to be calculated by taking the percentage of the Weibull distribution and making it the numerator to the total. And so when you set a refraction like that, you're always going to have the bottom sum to 100%, and that is how we derive our curve. So if I were to just redo that, I'd take that, G40, divided by E40, but I'd hit F4 to make that an absolute reference so that when I paste it across, it doesn't, I just pressed Control R, but all of these were done correctly. So anyway, and then when you multiply the construction costs, I'm actually multiplying this input by 25.6%. So the 1000 is going to be an absolute reference, as we'll see right here, and then multiplied by G41. If I were to delete that and redo it, I'd say equals 1000, hit F4, multiplied by 25.6%. Cool, that's how that works. And so again, what this really crucially allows me to do is change months of construction to 12 or 5 or whatever I want, really. And no matter what, it's always going to check out to 100%, so you're never going to have to worry about the costs being more than or less than what you plan them to be. Instead, you can go up and change the construction costs yourself. Maybe it's less than, or maybe it's, and more likely it's going to be more than what you originally planned. And anyway, that's about it. So enjoy this flexible way of modeling construction curves, and we'll be back to you next time. Please feel free to leave any feedback or shoot us an email with any questions. This workbook is also completely downloadable so that you can dissect it piece by piece on our website at triviumfinancialgroup.com/ecampus. And this is all free. So anyways, until next time, thanks so much.